Hey everybody, welcome to another, review. I haven't done one of these for a while, not since Aquaman, I believe. But I felt like I had to do this one because, of course, I just saw Captain Marvel yesterday, and that's a major release, probably the number one, the first blockbuster of 2019. And I am a pretty big Marvel Cinematic Universe fan. I mean, I've seen all 21 movies, all with my daughter, and most of them with my wife. So I figured I should, put this up for posterity. So maybe years from now, we could look back and say, oh, that's how I felt about Captain Marvel. There's also a couple of other movies I've seen more about mountain climbing, which I didn't think was going to be that interesting, but it's actually some pretty amazing movies, documentaries on mountain climbing. Free Solo, one of them, which just recently won the Oscar for Best Documentary. And then I saw Meru from the same collaborative team that made Free Solo. And then The Dawn Wall, which chronicled the very first free ascent up the Dawn Wall of El Capitan Yosemite by Tommy Caldwell and Kevin Jorgensen, which was, made quite the news when it happened. I think in 2015. I mean, it made international news. Even President at the time, President Obama, gave them congratulations. So I might do some reviews on some of those movies in a separate video. So it's sort of being sort of catching up on movie reviews. Those are some of the movies I've seen. I haven't really seen a lot of movies on the big screen for a while. So getting back to Captain Marvel. Boy, there was a lot of controversy in front of this movie. Not a big amount, but surprising for a Marvel Cinematic Universe offering. Usually Kevin Feige is pretty smart, a pretty savvy businessman to sort of avoid those type of things. So I like to think kind of the Michael Jordan almost, of producers. I think Jordan famously said that Republicans also bought shoes as well, when I think reporters were trying to press him to get more active on social issues or which party he supported. But be that as it may, I'm going to try to ignore whatever nonsense surrounded the movie based on what Brie Larson said or didn't say, how she was misinterpreted or not. I just want to kind of judge the film on its own merits. I will say that when I first walked into the movie, I was a little bit worried, mainly because of a few things, which had nothing to do, again, with Brie Larson's comments or any of the other controversies surrounding it. The first is that this movie is a prequel of sorts. It takes place in the 90s, and I'm not a big fan, in general, of prequels. I didn't like Captain America, the First Avenger. Well, didn't like is a strong word. I like, of course, all of the Marvel movies. They're all fine. But in the pantheon, I felt that the First Avenger was a little bit weak. And the reason for this mainly is because, here we go. It's set in World War II. It goes over his origins, and of course the origins happen during World War II. That's Cap's, backstory. But I wasn't really jazzed for this because in reality, I just wanted to see Captain America in modern day, the modern day stories. I didn't really want to see him back, again in World War II, fighting the Nazis and that type of thing. Because again, that's the problem with the prequel. You know how it's going to end. He's going to make it, or else where would he be in modern times? And here we go again with Captain Marvel. It's like, well, we know she's going to be around moving forward. So kind of going back in time 30 years to explore her origin just seemed like, maybe a little bit gimmicky. Like, is this like basically their way of using 90s nostalgia to sort of get you into it? Is it, cheating a little bit? So that was number one. And then number two, of course, there was quite a bit of negativity associated with the movie, like, kind of Brie Larson's wooden delivery. There was a lot of talk about how maybe she was a little bit miscast. And of course, it didn't help that she made some of these comments that really, I think, triggered a whole bunch of people on the internet and social media against her. And some of the trailers, she did seem a little bit wooden. So I went in there with, I think, pretty low expectations, or even expectations, because balanced against those problems that I was feeling, the whole prequel thing, and then maybe Brie Larson's somewhat wooden delivery, is the fact that Kevin Feige, is still the producer, and he still maintains a level of quality that these films always deliver. And I think even the very worst Marvel Cinematic Universe movie is at least average. I haven't really seen any horrible, horrible ones. So went in, I saw the IMAX with my wife and my 10-year-old daughter. And at the end of the movie, I have to say that certainly, the three of us enjoyed it quite a bit. And if you judge by the reaction of the audience that was there with us, which was a Saturday evening, like late afternoon evening, we saw the 4 o'clock showing. The response was pretty positive. There were a lot of laughters. The audience was in it. There were claps once in a while. And when the movie ended, there was polite applause. There was nice applause. And I loved it a lot more than I expected it to. And I went in thinking, it's going to be maybe an average, MCU movie, maybe a little bit below average. But I came out, putting it, I think, definitely above average. I think of the 21 movies released, I think it's probably in the top 10. And in terms of just enjoyment, having a good time, maybe higher than that, maybe even top 5, which I think will be very surprising to some of the haters out there who are so interested in tearing the movie down. So let's go back. There's going to be spoilers now, obviously, from here on out. I don't give non-spoiler reviews. I think, at least for me, that doesn't work. It's very silly. Try to talk about a movie without getting into the nuts and bolts and the bones of the movie. The only way you can do that is by spoiling the movie. So moving forward, why did I like Captain Marvel so much? Well, there's a couple of reasons. I think number one was, surprisingly to me, it was Brie Larson. I think she did a very good job. There's so much criticism of her, like her acting, her delivery, whatever. But for me, without any baggage, I guess, going into the movie, I thought she did a great job. I thought she was fine. And I think that her delivery, her acting, was consistent with the character and the script and what she's been given. She can't control that. The direction they went to tell the story of Captain Marvel's origin and to change it somewhat from the original comics is to create the amnesia story, which is basically the person who can't remember the origins of what's been going on. And so you follow her, you're on this journey with her, and essentially she plays someone who's been brainwashed, who has no idea who she is, and the vast majority of the movie is her trying to piece all that together. She also, comes from the background of being a Kree warrior. So, the movie starts with her already being a member of Star Force, which was led by Yon-Rogg, played by Jude Law, and it's a commando unit, basically a special forces unit of the Kree Empire. And you're very early on, given the sort of the backstory, or given the foundation, that the Kree Empire, ruled by a supreme artificial intelligence, does not value individual thought, does not value emotion, which is what you would expect from a empire society ruled by artificial intelligence. And so all of their warriors are encouraged to sort of think of the collective before the individual, put the needs of the society or the needs of the many over the needs of the few, to suppress emotion, to not get ruled by it, to think through everything logically and rationally, and again, to be very wooden and very robotic. That's all she knows. And so, of course, for the majority of the movie, as she's trying to piece together her past, she's going to try to act like the Kree warrior that she was essentially brainwashed to be. And that's going to give you a very wooden delivery style. It's going to give you a certain type of character. I think anyone who has studied any little bit about Brie Larson's pedigree knows that she's a very, very good actor, very, very talented. That's not really debatable. I mean, most movie critics, reviewers, people who followed her career, they acknowledge her talent at a very young age. Only her mid-20s. I mean, she essentially won a Best Actress Oscar for her work in Room with Jacob Tremblay. That was tremendous work. So she's absolutely capable of emotion. She's capable of playing many different things. So I have a lot of confidence that, as she grows into the character and she's allowed to expand, that, she'll be fine. And I feel like just like nobody complained about Sebastian Stan's work in Captain America Winter Soldier when he delivered this incredibly wooden performance devoid of any emotion, because he was basically being brainwashed by Hydra. Nobody complained about that. So I don't really see, the legitimacy of harping on Captain Marvel's character in this movie, because of her circumstances being very similar in essence to the Winter Soldiers. And I feel like, when I saw her, she was very likable. So I liked her very much. I felt for her. I was invested in her journey. I was rooting for her, and I wanted her to do well. So, that's just me personally. And I know that a lot of little girls, a lot of, like at least my daughter, she's 10 years old, she loved Brie Larson's character. She was cheering her on, and she liked her very, very much. So I think that might be a perspective, maybe to think about is, there's a lot of girl power in the movie, but, it's in service to the story, and it does, I think, appeal to, young girls, which as a father of a young girl, I have no problem with that. And I like movies, that kind of go that direction, because I think she does need to have, certain role models and things like that she can enjoy. And there's not many movies like Captain America or Wonder Woman out there, for like say 10, 11, 12-year-old to look at and just have a good time with. So Brie Larson, I think, did a fine job. So I like that. Moving forward, I also liked her chemistry with Samuel L. Jackson. I think the two of them, became almost like a buddy cop, like Lethal Weapon or something. Like they threw that in the mix. There's a lot of repartee between them, a lot of jokes, and she had wonderful chemistry with him. You really believe that the two of them, were partners, that they were sort of invested in, finish the mission together as you follow them throughout the story of the movie. And so I really bought into that, and I really enjoyed their interactions. And so not only was Brie Larson by herself, I think, very good, but I liked her interactions with the different characters. And number one on the list was Nick Fury. Great chemistry, great interactions. You definitely saw the bond between the two of them sort of developing. And on the subject of Nick Fury, another thing that's, I think, pretty amazing and needs to be discussed, since we're talking about Samuel Jackson, is that the de-aging formula that Marvel has been sort of playing with for the past couple of years in various films like Michael Douglas and Ant-Man, and also Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then Michelle Pfeiffer, etc. They have really, it's frightening. I mean, they have really sort of perfected it to the point where now they're confident enough to put, for instance, Agent Coulson, for quite a bit, good part of the film, close-ups. Samuel L. Jackson is almost a co-star in this movie. I mean, he's in a lot of the movie. And he's de-aged throughout, and there is no uncanny valley. You look at this movie and you just completely buy into the fact that this is, he's young, he's probably in his maybe late 20s, early 30s. No problems with that at all. So that's amazing. And I think it opens up the possibilities for them to do a lot of cool things in the future, but they have definitely conquered this problem. I think at the beginning, it might have been a little bit odd here or there, but this movie, man, Captain Marvel will go down movie number 21, as maybe the point where the de-aging technology is so good, you literally don't even think about it. That's how amazing it is. So worth, talking about at this stage. One of the highlights of the movie, in fact, one of the special effects, not very, showy, but it is a huge achievement that they were able to do that. Also really loved Larson's sort of chemistry interactions with her best friend. I think her name is Maria Rambeau. And when they finally met, they had a lot of real quiet moments. And there, I think, that's when I think, Carol Danvers' feelings became more well known. There was one point when she finally tracks down her best friend Maria. They're best friends. And of course, she hadn't been seen in 6 years. She disappeared for 6 years, and now she's finally back. And you begin to see sort of the pathos of the situation where, Maria lost her best friend, and she was also very close to Maria's daughter, Monica. Maria Rambeau is a single mother, and sort of the role that, Carol Danvers played in that. They were like a little family unit, and then to have basically lost that, and then have her come back, and you see sort of Carol Danvers also sort of struggling with that, the tragedy of not really remembering anything. And then her sifting through the photos and slowly beginning to see how much she loved them and how much she herself was loved. That was great, and Brie Larson did a really good job, in my opinion, acting with her eyes, with her face. It really came through. That talent came through, and it was great. And I think that sort of shows you the differences. Like before, when she was more wooden, yeah, that's because she was a Cree warrior with no other bonds, no other sort of frame of reference for who she is as a person. And now as her walls are breaking down, she's starting to regain her memory, she's becoming more human-like, reaching back to the sort of character that she was. So it shows you the potential there, and it shows you that this is not a limitation on a Oscar winner. This is not like an Oscar winner unable to give you range. She has the range, okay? So again, those relationships are really important, really love that. And so that's to start off with, Brie Larson, her relationships with the different characters. And then in terms of the acting, the supporting actors, they all did fantastic jobs. I think Jude Law, was great as Yon-Rogg. It's a kind of a thankless role, but he pulled it off really, really nicely. And you really didn't want to punch him in the face, at the end of the movie, because he's so smarmy and so sort of self-confident, so manipulative. So he did a great job. Again, Maria and Monica Rambeau, the mom and the daughter, real good chemistry again with Brie Larson, and the daughter is just adorable. Monica Rambeau, the little girl who played her, had so much charisma, just such an incredible job. I think she was maybe about my daughter's age, maybe about 10, 11 or so. Had a lot of sass, a lot of personality. It was just a joy, to have her on the screen, and again to see her play off of the adults. So she was a highlight, of the movie. Samuel L. Jackson, obviously, is always great. He's the man. And of course, they have this little running gag in the movie with this little cat called Goose. That's right. They named the cat after one of the Top Gun pilots, the one that died, I think. Right. So, anyways, they named it after Goose. And the cat is great. But what makes the cat great is Samuel L. Jackson playing off the cat. And so we'll get into the cat later, but fantastic, And of course, the villain, the head Skrull, played by Ben Mendelsohn. And Ben Mendelsohn destroys the role. He slays the role. He's hilarious. He's amazing. I think he out Alan Rickman in this movie, which is huge praise. High praise indeed. He's just like this perfect mixture of sarcasm and snarkiness, droll, humor, the way he delivers the lines. He's amazing. So when you look at this movie from beginning to end, at least the way I saw it, and again, I'm not just gushing because I've never seen one of these movies before. I've seen all 21 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. I've seen all the DC movies. So I've seen all of them. I was very impressed by the strength of the acting, the strength of the direction. They all did great jobs, and they were all very genuinely likable, and the ones that were unlikable were supposed to be unlikable. The only weak part, I would say, were the other members of Star Force, the other team members that Jude Law was leading. Gemma Chan plays Minerva the sniper, and she stood out a little bit, maybe just because I'm Asian and she's Asian. I saw Crazy Rich Asians, so she was kind of on my mind. So I was able to sort of keep her in mind. She's also a sniper. She's also the only female aside from Carol Danvers on the Star Force crew. So maybe that sets her apart. And then of course Jin-Won Honsu's character, which we saw when we met back in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, you can remember because you already knew him from Volume 1. But the other two were very sort of ill-formed, cookie-cutter, don't really remember them very well. But think about that. That's pretty amazing. There's only two characters, very minor ones, that are weak but all of the other characters are very, very strong. So I did very much enjoy the characterization, and because this movie is called Captain Marvel, and you follow, Captain Marvel throughout, it's really, really important to like Brie Larson, appreciate her performance, and then also, have good chemistry between her and all the people she's interacting with, and I think that did happen, which is really, really critical. So second, I think the story is actually really, really good. That was something that I was really worried about coming in, because again, I just hate prequels. It takes all the tension, sucks all the narrative tension out of it when you already know what's going to happen. Very rare, to find a prequel that works. But here, I think they sort of got around that by using the amnesia story. And I felt that the story was actually quite engaging. I wouldn't say it was shocking. I wasn't like, there's no usual suspects or Sixth Sense twist or anything. But there were, a few minor surprises. But it was very enjoyable, and everything made sense, which is important, because there's been some movies where you watch the movie and it just takes you out of it because there's some nonsensical things going on. And here, I felt that by and large, things made sense. To just quickly encapsulate the movie, a Kree undercover, agent went to Earth. She called herself Dr. Wendell Davis, but in fact, her name was Mar-Vell. They changed the gender a little bit slightly. They made her a female instead of male. So, it played very nicely by Annette Bening. Annette Bening, how could I forget? So yeah, Annette Bening plays both the Supreme Intelligence as well as the original Mar-Vell that Carol Danvers looked up to. And Annette Bening, again, was just phenomenal. So she did a great job. So in any case, played by Annette Bening, Mar-Vell infiltrates S.H.I.E.L.D. And the U.S. government, and she basically begins to study the Tesseract, which was in their possession. She was trying to use the Tesseract and use the Space Gem, which is really what the Tesseract is, use the Space Gem's power to essentially try to save the Skrull refugees. So in this movie, unlike the comics where both the Skrulls and the Kree are basically horrible, in this one they decided to portray at least this group of Skrulls as benign. They're just trying to get to a safe homeworld. The Kree Empire had basically destroyed their planet, creating thousands of, essentially disaffected Skrulls. And of course, the Skrulls can only survive by using their shape-shifting abilities to blend into the population, which would obviously terrify and anger the Kree because they can't stand that type of, infiltration. She's trying to help them, but before she can finish her work, she is essentially pursued and found out by Jude Law's character Yon-Rogg and then murdered by him. This murder occurs en route to her trying to, either deliver or use this light speed engine, which I don't think she's perfected, but she's trying to get that to her space station, her little secret lab, where the Skrull refugees are hiding. And Carol Danvers was helping her pilot that engine. So during that scene, the ship gets shot down by Yon-Rogg, and in that aftermath, Mar-Vell was murdered, shot by him while she was trying to destroy the engine. So Carol Danvers picks it up, shoots the engine herself, and the blast of the engine essentially infuses her with up the power of the Tesseract. So her powers are sourced from one of the Infinity Stones, from the Space Gem, and also mixed somewhat with the blood of the Kree, because Mar-Vell was dead with blood on her. And later on, in the Kree capital of Hala, they transfused her as well with Kree blood. So there's this interesting intermix of Kree, Kree powers, which is strength, endurance, etc., and then of course the Space Gem itself. So that's what happened to her. The blast, of course, completely concussed her, and being infused with the power of an Infinity Stone also led to her complete memory loss. And then, of course, the engine was destroyed, so there was no clue where the rest of it was. And so Yon-Rogg brought her back to Hala to try to get that information out of her, or at worst to study her, because she essentially became the living embodiment of the technology that the Kree was after. And that's where the brainwashing began. And then what happened is that on another mission to try to extract a Kree operative, she was captured by the Skrulls, who then try to dig through her memories to figure out, because the Skrulls, you can imagine, are also after the same Lightspeed engine. They want to use it to escape. And so while they're digging through her memories, they trigger something in her, and then she escaped. And during the escape, she crashes on Earth. And when she crashes on Earth, that's when she kind of meets, Fury, shenanigans ensue. And on Earth is where she begins to try to retrace her path, rebuild her memory. And eventually that's where she starts meeting her, her old friend. She learns the truth of the Skrull situation. And then she decides to help them. They find the hidden space station. And then she finally essentially wins free of the mind control of the Kree, and then realizes her full potential. So at no point during the story, this was not like one of the greatest stories ever told, but it was a very solid story. It's a very solid, interesting origin story. At no point during the story did I feel like things didn't make sense or they're taken out of it. Everything seemed to flow very nicely. The surprises were nice. There was good passion. Again, the acting helped, and things fit together. So I was quite satisfied with that. And there were little aspects of the story that I really enjoyed, because as you go through, you begin to kind of realize the theme of what they're trying to show, which is that, Carol Danvers got the powers of course, Captain Marvel from the Infinity Stone, but the way she was able to fully access them and how she finally was able to overcome the Kree mind control and kind of brainwash and the programming was inherent in her and what she was like as a human being. And that kind of ties a little bit into the girl power, because throughout there's little hints where you get an idea for her personality. And so I think it's really unfair to say that Brie Larson plays Carol Danvers as somebody with no personality. She's very flat, because if you pay attention, you have actually a really good idea of what her personality is. She's actually, what she is? And you have a hint of this if you pay attention. Brie Larson is basically Maverick from Top Gun. So I just want you to take a few to think about that. Her character is essentially, she's a female version of Maverick, Tom Cruise from Top Gun, because she's a pilot, and her best friend Maria Rambeau, they're pilots, and they're female pilots in a man's world. So they have to be a little bit extra spunky, extra good, have a little bit extra attitude just to make it. And how can you be a female pilot back in the 90s? You show little snippets of her as a person, and you realize she's very ornery, she's very stubborn. She's just kind of like, how many times have you heard this said about LeBron James or Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods or Bryce Harper? Like, if somebody tells me I can't do something, that makes me even more motivated to go ahead and do it and to prove you wrong, right? That's something that's said about a lot of male superstars, right? Male athletes. And that's kind of her attitude. She does everything. She doesn't want to be held back. She doesn't feel like there's anything as a woman, as a girl, that she can't do that a guy can do, for instance. She's playing baseball, she's driving go-karts recklessly. When she's in training, she's going for it. And she falls down a lot. She gets hurt a lot. She gets knocked down a lot. But she always gets back up. She never, ever gives up, which is like a really good lesson to learn, whether you're a boy or a girl. If you want to be successful in life, that's a really important lesson, because there's going to be tons of people who are going to be naysayers, who are going to tell you you're not good enough, who are not going to want to listen, they don't think that your message is important, and who are just going to give you all sorts of essentially reasons for why you should never try anything and why things will never work. Those are called haters, in case there's any confusion, and you have to, you have to actually ignore them, obviously, to achieve anything of importance. And how many times have you heard that from superstar male athletes from the men's side, and also from the women too, like say Lindsey Vonn or whatever. But how many times have you heard that from Draymond Green? You have to ignore the naysayers and keep going. So that is her personality, stubborn, ornery, definitely will never give up, and all of that is what allowed her to overcome essentially the Supreme Intelligence's attempt to control her. And that's how she essentially broke free of that and unleashed her full potential. And once she did that, the rest is history. And so a lot of her personality, a lot of Captain Marvel's personality, or Carol Danvers' personality, as sort of performed by Brie Larson, does come out. If you pay attention, you see that. You can see her impetuousness, her passion, and her snarkiness. She's very snarky. I think some reviewers maybe confuse that with Tony Stark. Because Tony, as portrayed by Robert Downey Jr., is very snarky, but they're very, very different characters. And in point of fact, she has a little bit of cockiness to her. She's also very loyal, and at the heart of it, she's also a very good person, and you can see that because of how she supported, the single mother and the daughter, how she was playing almost like another mother figure, and how much she cared. So, and also how much she looked up to Dr. Wendy Lawson, who at the time was Mar-Vell. The risks that she took. So you get a very good sense, by the way, of Carol Danvers' character. It's a very admirable character. And so when she, sort of explodes onto the scene, she was able to, to save the day, to repel the Kree invasion. Another thing that I really enjoyed, by the way, about this is sort of the denouement, or the climax. One of the complaints lodged against some Marvel formulaic storytelling is that you always have like the hero who at the end always has to fight a bad guy with powers that are very similar to the hero. I won't go into too many details. If you just, this to be true, okay? Like Iron Man, Ironmonger, Ant-Man, Yellow Jacket, Incredible Hulk, Abominable. Okay, we know this, right? So one of the things I really liked about the climax here is that, it didn't end in like this world-spanning, galaxy-spanning huge fight. It was basically about young Rogue, calling in Ronan the Accuser to basically carpet bomb the Earth. I don't know whether that was in a fit of pique, or whether it was just a revenge. He was just angry that Danvers had broken free of their control, or he was still after the Tesseract. But he calls in Ronan the Accuser to come in and carpet bomb the world. To carpet bomb Earth. Okay, sorry for the break. I had to splice this because my daughter came down to interrupt me. So I was talking again about the fact that there's a lot of these cliches where you have the final climax always between the hero and a villain that has very similar powers to the superhero. So in this case, they didn't do that. Getting back to discussing it. And she comes and she just basically goes and she repels the invasion. She destroys the missiles, she destroys a ship, a few ships, and essentially, showcases her full powers, which is impressive. Now, there's another complaint I've heard, which is that she's overpowered, but I think that's wrong on many levels. It just shows, again, in my opinion, a lack of understanding, a lack of imagination. So first of all, I don't think that she's particularly overpowered. She's showing powers that are in league with some of the more powerful members of that universe. Trying to cast aspersions, I think, on the story or her character because of the power thing doesn't make much sense, because, of course, in DC Comics for literally a century, Superman has been one of the most boring characters ever, because what is he? And when you see Justice League, the movie, when you read the comics, that's one of the major things about Superman. There's just, what can you do with a character that is invulnerable, has super strength, has heat vision? They even riff on it. There was a joke. There was one comic where the Flash was, somebody shot a bullet that was going to kill the Flash, and the bullet, is tracking him perfectly, and the Flash could not stop running because the bullet would kill him. And I remember this vividly when I was a young boy reading it. You know what the Flash did to finally destroy this bullet that couldn't be beaten, that could always that was gaining on him little by little and was always tracking him? He basically ran to Clark Kent in Metropolis, and at the very last second he swerved, and the bullet just hit Clark Kent on the back of the neck. And this bullet that was supposed to be able to be like the most powerful weapon, was a killer weapon, Clark Kent just basically did that and just kind of looked and said, "Oh, maybe I got bit by a mosquito." So even DC understands the situation where if you don't bring kryptonite into the mix, how can you reasonably try to challenge Superman? And the idea is to challenge him gets a little bit crazy. So I don't see the problem, at all with Captain Marvel's power set in terms of her being overpowered when you consider, for instance, Superman, and nobody has a problem with Superman, for instance. Um, but I think even within the context of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I don't think she's ridiculously overpowered. Her power comes from the space gem, the Scarlet Witch, of course, Wanda. Her powers come from the Mind Gem, and she's been shown to be tremendously powerful. She was able to destroy a Infinity Gem and hold off Thanos with the other hand. I don't know if you see Infinity War again. So she's very, very powerful, actually. Vision himself, when he had or possessed the Mind Gem. Thor, who is a god, and in Infinity War took the brunt of a dying star. So there's definitely characters with equal power sets, I think, to Captain Marvel. I don't think she's ridiculously overpowered compared to them. And then when you consider the fact that there are galactic menaces like Thanos, again, I don't think that there's any issue with people say, there's no one that can beat her, she has no weaknesses. I think that's a little bit ridiculous in the sense that she's very powerful in that particular context of the movie, where yes, with her newfound abilities, of course she's going to be able to very easily destroy these missiles, destroy a ship, but she will come up against more galactic threats that can overcome her. And I think Thor can give her a run for her money. And I think the Incredible Hulk, at the height of his anger and his rage, can give her a run for her money. So I didn't feel that problem. And I also very much liked the fact that she gets down at the bottom at the end and she confronts Yon-Rogg. And of course there's a lot of betrayal there because essentially she was violated, if you want to really think about it. You took her when she was unconscious and you brainwashed her, and then you essentially kidnapped her, and then you essentially did things to her body. You transfused her with her blood. You trained her to be an assassin, to be a special commander. I mean, there was a lot of violation, and there's that little kind of subtle theme underneath it. And they face each other off, and of course this guy who's been just lying to her, manipulating her, dominating her all this time, he tries to pull this stupid, you will never truly be free of me, and you will never truly, be, the best version of yourself unless you beat me hand to hand with no powers. And so this is such a cliche, horrible thing that we've seen so many times, and it's horrible that the hero, whether it's a man or a woman, always falls for this. And it was so refreshing that Captain Marvel just basically blasts into Kingdom Come. And I love that. She just basically destroys him. And she comes over and she looks down and she's like, that is not going to work with me. Don't even think about that. And then she says, no, I got nothing to prove to you, right? Now, this was a PG-13 or rated R movie. What she should have done next for what he had done to her was just to basically take his little head in her hand and just basically crush it to a pulp. But obviously, we can't do this in a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. So she basically drags him like a little child, and she throws him into a shuttle, and she sends him back to the Kree homeworld with a message like, I'm coming for you, which is fine. It sets up, I think, maybe later stories and that type of thing. So I think that was very refreshing in terms of there's no big battle. She very handily beats that guy. And while some people feel like, again, that's an aspect of her being overpowered, I don't think that's true. I mean, you could have her go toe-to-toe with Ronan or whatever. You could have created a MacGuffin and tried to have her do it, but I think that would have been a disservice. So it was very fresh, the way they decided to handle the final battle. It was a lot more mental, a lot more emotional, and there was a lot more satisfying closure of her character arc with Yon-Rogg. And it also really nicely sets up sort of the very ending, which kind of answers the question, why, what happened to her, right? What happened to her for 25, 30 years? What did she decide to do? It came a little bit quickly, but if you slow down and really pay attention, then I think there's a lot to it. So essentially at the very end, understand that they never got the light drive warp or whatever. They never got that device. Mar-Vell was never able to finish it. Remember, she had to destroy it. That's what gave her her power. She had to destroy it in order to prevent it from falling into Kree hands, and in so doing, she gained her powers as Captain Marvel. And so they're sitting there, and now she realizes kind of the Skrulls' point of view, kind of understanding, your enemy's point of view. she's grown because of her experiences, her memories being regained in the course of the movie, and she realizes sort of the bad that she, had done, that she had taken part of. Sure, brainwashed and unknowingly, but she did play a role in the suffering of the Skrulls. And then, of course, their salvation was destroyed to make her. And so at that point, she makes a very difficult decision. And what is that decision? She has just regained her memories, her best friend, this little girl that she loves probably as much as a mom. She has her family there. She has all this power, and she could stay on Earth, but she chooses instead exile. And what I mean by exile is not that she was punished, but it's self-imposed, which is that to right a wrong that she felt she was a part of, and also to sort of make up for the fact that her existence came at the cost of a solution that could have saved the Skrulls. She leaves all that behind. Just when she can gain all of it back, she leaves all of that behind to again right that wrong. So that is where I think she's the most heroic. Not heroic for blowing up ships and all that, which is, that's great too. I mean, we don't want to destroy the Earth or anything like that. That's more superficial, right? The superficial thing. But the true heroism, which again, I think Brie Larson demonstrated very well when she said this, it wasn't showy, it wasn't flashy. She wasn't hammy. But you could see in her eyes and her body language the sacrifice she made, which is, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave again, leave all of this behind, and I'm going to make it right for you. And how am I going to make it right for you? I am going to help you find, I'm going to help you, find sanctuary. Help you with the kids and the old Skrulls and all of that. Get you safe. And then I'm going to fight the Kree Empire, the entire Kree Empire, which is pretty crazy. If you think that she's overpowered, she'll need every little bit of her power to be able to do that. That's a monumental task. And I know I'm going to try to go against them and protect you, from what they did. And that's to atone in some small way, for her role in their destruction, and also, after all, the salvation that Mar-Vell was trying to create. While it didn't work out, it created Captain Marvel. And so in that aspect, she maybe perhaps felt that her destiny was to be their salvation, just in a different form and unexpected. So I think there was great poetry there. So, you could say maybe am I writing a better script than maybe the script writers were writing? Maybe, but I don't think so. That's one of the criticisms you always have to be careful of. Don't do the work of the script writers for them. Don't write a better story than they will. But I think there's a lot of that, there's a lot of that subtlety that you can see into that. And so she leaves. And so I also love the fact that she didn't leave because she was going off and trying to, fight this big war. She left mainly to save the Skrulls. And you can see that without a light speed drive, right, that could take a long, long time. You're trying to go essentially intergalactic travel, and the movie ends with her leading them off. And then there's a little inside joke with a pager. Nick Fury uses the pager initially to essentially call his superiors in because he didn't know her as well. So she was pretty upset about that. But then the joke came around full circle because she took the pager and modified it, and she gave it to him and said, if you really, really need me, then page me, but only in a true emergency. And Nick Fury understood sort of the gravity of that because he knew what she was doing, and that explains why he never paged her until the very end of Infinity War. Because he knew what paging her might mean. It might mean taking her away from the Skrulls that she was trying to protect. So I think that's why, from beginning to end, the movie was extremely satisfying because you saw this really strong female character making decisions. You saw a nice character arc, absolutely. Even though it was a little bit cheating sometimes because of that whole amnesia shortcut, but you still saw that this woman had a very, very well-defined character arc, and you saw little snippets and foundations of her character that was laid out that then were paid off at the end, and so that was great. There was a little bit of a twist where you thought that the Skrulls who were going to be really, really evil turned out to be actually the victims. Ben Mendelsohn was able to deliver the lines very, very nicely. He was able to, to flip it on a dime and go from being very sinister to now being sort of, sympathetic, almost. So all of that worked, really, really well for me at least. And I think a lot of girls are gonna love that. A lot of little girls are gonna really enjoy that. I know my wife really liked it. I know my 10-year-old really loved it. And when you look at the totality of it, I think it had a really, really good message. And it also sets you up for the continuation of her character. And I like to end basically by saying, that Chris Evans as Captain America didn't really hit his stride until perhaps Winter Soldier, because he was now in modern times, he caught up. The sort of character he played in World War II really, you just see the infancy of the character. You didn't see him with just full potential, right? Until Winter Soldier and Civil War, and then the Avengers moving on. And I think something very similar is going to happen, I think, with Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, where you're going to see more of that personality with both its goods and its bads. Some aspects of it can be really annoying, right, to people, but you can see the heart of her. And I think this movie does an incredible job showing you, again, the heart of a hero and how heroic she really is. And that while she's not perfect, and she has some mannerisms that could be really annoying, impetuous, impulsive, headstrong, again, snarky, sarcastic, but the core of her, there's good there. The core of her is very, very good, and that's a hero that I think is worth following and worth rooting for, and that's the most important thing. I would not love this movie as much and have as good a time with it if I didn't root for her character as much, and I think that's a testament to both the script as well as the actress. I'm not going to talk too much about the end credit scene because it's sort of a waste. It just shows her coming back. You're going to see that in Endgame anyways. The second end credit scene essentially has to do with the little cat, and the cat is really, really great. It got a lot of laughs. The cat actually originally belonged to Mar-Vell, one of the Kree scientists. And it turns out not to really be a cat, but actually to be this thing called a Flerken, which is an alien that can actually create extra dimensions. So there's like this gaping maw that you can fit anything into. And there's some really, really good gags that they made with the cat. The cat is how Fury loses his left eye. He would not let the cat alone. He just kept messing with the cat, this cute cat stuff. And finally, the Flerken, I guess, got sick of it, just scratched him. And because it's like an alien, I think the scratch basically festered and took his eye out. Which, I think some people could complain that's not a very epic way to go. A little bit of an anticlimax. But at the same time, how else, would there be a better way of showing Fury losing an eye without it being cliche? Because he doesn't have like a socket, so it's not like somebody ripped the eye out of him. You saw it from Winter Soldier; it was white, it was milky white. So what would have given him that? So I think they decided, because they couldn't really think of a truly epic way. It's one thing if there's like this epic battle or something like that, and they pluck the eye out of his eye socket or something like that. But at the end of the day, you don't want to go that gory route. So I think they kind of ran out of ideas for doing it, and just figured, well, if we can't think of a epic way of doing it, then at least we can make it a funny way, right? And so okay, I'll give them that. I didn't care one way or the other. Another possible solution would have been maybe just to go the Dark Knight way, where you never find out how the Joker became the Joker and how he got his scars. And it'll always be something that your imagination will have to take care of. So that would have been another interesting way to go with Nick Fury's eye, but they didn't go that route. There's a ton of Easter eggs, a lot of 90s jokes. I was afraid that it was going to be a sort of a gimmick, but they didn't go too much on that. It didn't dominate it. So I think that it was done very nicely. It wasn't disruptive. So of course, without summarizing this review as long enough as it is, without summarizing every single little nitpick of the movie, there was a lot of things. The Stanley cameo was really sweet. The beginning where they spliced all of his cameos brought a tear to my eye because it was just so nostalgic, honoring him. pretty, pretty amazing stuff. And so when you put all of that together, and you go in there without the baggage of, this preconceived baggage, just judge it, and you pay attention and you really think about the movie and you kind of devote enough of your time and your attention and you're invested and you really think about it, I think it's a great movie, and I think you're going to really get a lot out of it. And as for the girl power, I did not think that the feminism and the girl power was in my face. I didn't think it was toxic. I thought it was fine. It was very encouraging. And I think girl power and feminism in movies like this, in the proper context, in the service of a good movie. This is Captain Marvel after all. I think it's very refreshing. I have no problems with it. And so hopefully this will propagate that. This movie made 455 million and change worldwide. It opened to about 150 million and change in the United States. These are very, very successful numbers. And it was successful based mainly on the loyalty of MCU fans. A lot of us are male. I think 61% male versus 55% female for Wonder Woman. And I think hopefully as the word spreads, as the word spreads, and some of the real reviews, not the troll, stupid, reviews, where people are just basically trying to tank it from the very beginning. As real word of mouth begins to go out, like say for me, somebody who actually did watch it, and put up a YouTube review about it, and not like a professional reviewer, but just somebody who watched it, enjoyed it. As it goes out, I think the female audience may slowly begin to catch up. I think it's a wonderful movie to take your daughters out to, if they can handle it, if they're of an age to handle it. I would recommend that in a snap. And again, just to show you, my wife does not see movies like this very often, but she made time out of her busy work schedule to go see it with me. And our daughter, and she really, really liked it. So hopefully that will propagate. It will continue to do very, very well, and it deserves to. And I'd like to end, of course, this is not meant, again, to be pejorative or negative, but I was reading this Facebook review, and there's this guy who's just like on and on about how it's a waste of time, it's boring, he didn't like it, he thought Brie Larson was horrible. So I was like, okay. And again, there's a narrative there. Like there was another person who was the same thing, and basically said he didn't like Brie Larson's politics, and he could not separate the movie from the politics. So it's like, how valuable a review is that when you basically fess up and say that. So this guy was doing that. So I said, okay, let me see what this guy's about, because I was thinking to my mind, I was like, this sounds like basically somebody who does this have any daughters? Does this have any daughters or whatnot? No. I pressed on his Facebook profile. It's a white guy with 3 sons. So now I'm not saying that everybody who hates the movie is like a white guy with no daughters. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying is that, stuff like that matters. Like if you're African American and you watch Black Panther, it's going to touch you in a way that doesn't touch me or, a white person. It's going to be special, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I just want to say that if you have daughters, and this movie is going to be a little bit more for you. You're going to appreciate it a little bit more. And when I see some of the hate for it, which I think is just ridiculous, and then when you think about it, saying it's one of the worst. There's people who think it's the worst movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Again, I've seen every one of those. This movie is way better than some of the dregs of the MCU. The MCU has put up some very questionable movies, if you want to go back. They think that Captain Marvel was worse than the Incredible Hulk, really, with Ed Norton. Okay. But I just was really amused, where I was really thinking, what's with this guy? What's the guy is this, right? When I read his diatribe, and then you click on the Facebook profile, it's a white guy with 3 sons, which is like, okay, that's the stereotype right there, right? So again, give this movie a chance. The reason I put this long review up is because I went in there with actually pretty low expectations, and it blew me away. It's one of my favorite, actually. Like I said, top 5. It's easily top 10, but might be top 5. And I really enjoyed it. And I think Brie Larson is going to be a lot more fun moving forward. And I think she's not going to be like this wooden. I could be wrong, but I think moving forward, I think she's not going to be wooden delivery or whatever. that was part of the narrative for the story. And if you paid attention, you saw little glimpses where she breaks out with her true character. You're going to see basically Tom Cruise Maverick in the Avengers, which is going to be very interesting dynamic, because we're going to have a lot of really strong personalities like Tony, Cap, Doctor Strange, Peter Quill, and you're going to put in Maverick. You're going to put in Maverick's personality with Superman's powers. I think that could be a lot of fun, actually. So I'm really looking forward to that. And until next time, do take care.